Vintage port is all about taking these extraordinary wines from a single year, will be bottled 2 years after the harvest, and it will be bottled with no filtration at all. It's exactly just what nature gave us. Makes that every bottle of vintage is a time capsule. It will capture the character of the year. It will capture our work that we have done. But as such, as it ages in the bottle, it will throw a sediment. So the vintage port needs to be decanted before it is served. Vintage port will have a different taste profile depending on its age. A young vintage port in its first 6 to 10 years in the bottle will be essentially an expression of fruit, intensity of fruit. A vintage port, when it is young, it's got so much structure, so much dimension, so much tannin that the fruit expression is its main character. Then, as it ages in the bottle, in a reductive atmosphere, so in absence of oxygen, the structure, the tannin will sediment out into the bottom of the bottle, and it will develop these bottle maturity aromas, which makes a vintage port so attractive. And the older it gets, the more mellow it becomes, the more complex it becomes. And if you then go to the second phase of its aging, I normally say between 10 and 20 years of age, that is a very interesting phase also in vintage port, because you will combine still a lot of freshness of youth, but you get your first complexities of bottle maturity. Then from your 20 to 40 years of age, that's where your bottle maturity becomes your main aromas, your main characters, but you still have plenty of youth behind. Then I normally say after 45, 50 years of age, then that's where vintage port becomes extraordinarily complex. They don't have a lot of color, but they are so rich and so fine. And drinking vintage port can be an adventure of not only discovering the year, the port house, how it is aging or what phase it is in its development, which makes vintage port a great wine to be enjoyed by any wine enthusiast, any wine lover, a port to discover on his own or to share with a group of friends around a table. I enjoy drinking vintage port right at the end of the meal. Normally when you've finished all of your desserts and you just want maybe a bit of cheese, and well, here we have a great Stilton cheese, which is a natural combination. A bit of Stilton, your vintage with the delicious Stilton cheese makes such a great combination. What a great combination. Stilton cheese with a vintage port. You get the intensity and the power of a Stilton, but vintage port is a great match. You get the intensity, the power of the vintage, and they really go well side by side. We're drinking here the Guimaraens 2008 vintage port, which is 12 years old, 10 years in the bottle. So it's beautiful, scented. First signs of bottle maturity, but it's got youth, it's got freshness. What a combination. Vintage port, because it does its aging in the bottle, that's why we recommend you decant it to take it off its sediment and then let it breathe for a couple of hours before being served. And the vintage port, we normally recommend that you drink it within 24, 48 hours after the bottle being opened. Naturally, a younger vintage will keep its characters for longer. A very old, mature vintage, you really want to drink it within the first day of having opened it. And that's how you'll get the most enjoyment.